English.
Printing machines
Maybe.
mix our
JP is
own
leaving
colors.
just as I
Now
press
it's
the
always so
button to
much fun.
record. Here, JP.
I know.
Get over here,
So long.
JP.
Yeah.
All right.
And
Welcome to the first episode of 2025. We're back here, Education Roundtable. I'm excited. This is a good conversation, at least in my heart. It's a good conversation. Hopefully, it turns out that way. But we're going to be talking about communication today, and not just any type of communication, why people struggle with communication. And I guess I'm making an assumption that people struggle with communication. Do we believe that to be true or not true?
totally
true.
Totally
true. Totally true. We all believe that communication is important, though. And I feel like when we have these conversations, we're like, just communicate, tell me what you need, just ask questions. So why is it people have an actual struggle when it comes to communication? Who wants to jump in first?
I will. So I think for students, they don't want to be wrong. And so when you ask them a question, they won't answer or respond just because they don't want it to be the wrong answer. And then they feel like I'm going to yell at them and belittle them, which I don't do.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big one.
Yeah. It's interesting that you said that because I actually asked the same question to a group of students in class. And that was the first thing that they mentioned, is that they didn't want to be wrong. They didn't want to be belittled. And it's a great thing to hear that from you as the instructor. You're like, I would never do that. But I asked them kind of where they got that from. Like, where do they feel like they're being belittled? And can you guess where they said?
In the classroom.
In the classroom. From and maybe not necessarily here, but like growing up over time, they've either seen someone be belittled, they've seen someone be made fun of, they've been the person who's been made fun of. So how do we, I guess, and not that we have to answer this question today, but it's obviously we need our students to communicate. We need them to ask questions. How do we convince them to communicate and that they're not going to feel belittled in the classroom?
Just by consistent feedback and behavior.
Yeah, I agree. Who wants to jump in with?
Well, I think conflict too. I think people are scared of conflict. So if there's a way that I'm doing it, but you're doing this way, instead of communicating it, I think they don't want the conflict. And there's some of them that, their personality is just more aloof. Then you got the ones that are just more quieter, and then you got the ones that are so quiet, the ones that are aloof and think they need to speak for them. Exactly. And then it just piles down. Then people are like, well, why would I answer? Because they already got that going. So I think it has to do with conflict, just being confident, I think. And a lot of people just, I think that's scary to them. Like, what if I do it and I'm wrong? Or what if I say something and it makes you mad? Or you got the ones that's like, what if I say this and it makes you mad? I don't care, So I think there's just lots of personalities, and communicating, just trying to find what works is kind of hard in a big setting, but individually, if you take it one step, I think it's a little bit easier. So I think that's where it gets tricky, because then if you do individually, then what I say to Louie might not be what someone else overheard, or might not be said exactly the way.
Telephone game.
And now they're like, well, Willie said this to me, but she didn't say that to me. And so you just got to make sure everything's just, like you said, consistent, which then helps them grow, and trying to make sure you show them, like, you don't need your protector here. Like, come on and talk. You can do this. So I think conflict is a big thing.
Do you think that you're having those conversations with your students? Because that is another big one. Like, people don't, either they want them to like them, like we want to be liked, or I don't want to start anything. So is that a conversation that you have to help somebody like break out of their shell?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. While still maintaining the other one. So some people just like communication, even if it's false and negative towards
Right.
someone. So, and they like that attention. And so it's just trying to figure out what route they're trying, what's the end result here?
Mhm.
Where are you trying to be? What you trying to get to?
And then I think another aspect of communication is they don't ask or tell you things because they don't want to be told no. It's the old, I'd rather ask for forgiveness before I ask for permission. So,
And then pretending you never knew the whole
Yeah,
time. You know,
uh-huh.
I never knew.
Mhm.
I heard from the grapevine. I
Yeah.
could.
So that's a big one, not wanting to be told no.
And I guess in that it's probably just, and I guess you can throw in your 2 cents about how we curve that, but is it showing the student, telling the student, or having them understand why it's important?
Yeah, like if they're going to be absent or they know that they're going to take a trip to, let us know so they can be prepared. It's not just for us, it's for their success as well.
And also, I
that type
think
of
you have to
thing.
prepare your educators too.
Mhm.
So then that way, as the communication's going down, the student knows the why and the educator knows the why. So then it's easier
To
to.
get them to
Mhm.
toe the line.
I just listened to a really cool
Just kidding.
podcast the other day. We're all on the same team, so we're all telling.
Hey.
Right?
I listened to a podcast the other day that was very similar to what you were saying. They were saying that sometimes when we're having conversations with other people, that we associate the response to the person instead of the response to whatever action needs to happen.
Right.
And so that's why it's hard sometimes to say no. Or hard sometimes to hear no because they've taken it personally. Like
Right.
you told me no, so you don't like me.
Right.
Like, no, you need to separate those things. Like I told you no because the answer is no. You can't do that. I still love you, but let's make sure that we're doing the right thing over here. But yeah. I was that kid growing up, like not necessarily in the classroom with that, but definitely at home with my mom. Like, I'm not trying to hear anything this lady has to say.
Right.
I will ask for forgiveness or get in trouble later, whichever. But I realize now, like in the classroom, like a lot of the things that you're doing, it can't be I ask later. Like I need to know, how to diagnose things, how to color things, or like I need to know all of these things ahead of time. And I can't just guess and ask for forgiveness because you might kill someone.
Yeah.
I always try to give them positive reinforcement. When they'll ask a question, I'll be like, "It's a great question," or "I'm glad you asked that."
Yeah. And it's interesting, like how important just those small words will help a person like feel comfortable asking questions. It'll like relieve them, like, oh shoot, because I thought this was dumb.
Yeah, I always say there's no stupid question. I mean, if you don't know, you don't know.
Well, there's one, the one that doesn't get asked.
Right. Well,
yeah,
that is true. And then you come across students who always want to answer because they think they're the right one and they want to direct the class and they have the first suggestion. And so you also have to learn how to be respectful with them and show them that they need to allow other people to the ability to answer the question or come up with ideas. It's not just them. That can be as big a communication issue as well.
I was looking at our DISC assessment, which I need to update on my wall. And I was looking at just the different types of people that we have here on campus. And I thought exactly that thing. I was just like, oh, look at all these people that are not afraid to speak out. All of these people, which outnumbers this group of people at the bottom who might be a little bit more hesitant to speak up, but it's the same thing in the classroom. You're looking at just traditionally people who aren't afraid to, and then the group that will quietly just try to disappear. But that's the cool thing as instructors, because we get to walk into the classroom and we notice that. We're like, oh, you're one of those. You have all the answers. Cool, I'm not talking to you right now.
I think sometimes too, the ones that are loud, I guess, and the ones that think they have all the right answers. I think then the ones that are watching, the quieter ones look to them like they have the right answer. So then they come up with their own answer. And then you're like, where did this even come from? So then people feel like they're out of like this invisible loop, you know, and really there is no loop. It's like a figure eight, infinity. So it's literally just keeps going. But I feel like people that if you feel like you're out of that loop, and then even if there really isn't a loop, like you just think they know more and no one said. So just the communication through that as well. So
I wonder how we bridge that. Do we have any ideas though? So for that group of students that's in there, a large population who has all the answers, know what's going on, not afraid to ask, not afraid to jump in, and then everyone who else is kind of just sitting back a little. How do we make sure communication is getting? How do I know that you know everything that's going on and that you actually have the answers and that you're feeling confident in that? Actually, how do I bridge that for my students?
So what I do personally, if I have the one that's like, hey, I had to come talk to you because they sent me to talk to you to handle this, I literally will go straight to that student. Like, hey, you send them to come talk to me. Like, so that way I face-to-face communication that way versus responding to whoever decided they wanted to come up and ask, but then also asking questions and confirming with more of the students that you know react that way. Like if you're quieter, you know who your quieter ones would be, and be like, how's that pin, JP? You like it? And so then that way they know that you notice them.
I also like to close class with, I ask everybody 2 questions. What's something new that you learned today that you didn't have any idea? And then what did you like most about class? And so then everyone speaks. And so then, you can get a feedback as to did they really pay attention? And sometimes the answers are really surprisingly wonderful. So
You actually were paying attention. I thought you were on your phone the whole time. And look at you, the most incredible answer ever.
I'm so proud of you.
Yeah. Well, I like telling my students at the end of the class when they've accomplished something that they did a great job.
Yeah.
I like to
always
high
tell 'em,
five.
or tell them
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Great day. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Just reinforcing that I want them here.
Yeah. It's so huge. Like I think that sometimes it seems like it's like the smallest thing that you're doing, but it really is probably the most impactful thing, that you care enough to ask them a question, that you care enough to give them a high five, that you care enough to say thank you, you had a great day today. They're like, oh my gosh, because if my teacher didn't tell me that, I wouldn't know.
It's like saying good morning. If I don't say good morning, my friends, as they're coming inside the school, they literally let me know, oh, you didn't even say good morning today. Or if they're leaving, I say, have a good night, make good choices. Now they kind of mock it, but they know,
right.
you know what I mean? So they always have that
And
sense.
they miss it when it's not done.
So even though you said what you said, we're going to move past and I'll still say good morning and make good choices, and then eventually they say, okay, cool. It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
What else do we have to add to that? Really?
Communication. I think that body language communicates a lot, and it's something that I struggle with, or that I've been told I struggle with. Somebody will say something, and apparently I'll make a face, and that gives me away.
The eyebrows.
I didn't see that. Not sure what you're talking about there, Lily.
When I'm deliberate about it, I'm aware, but I do it a lot that I'm not aware of. And I have to be pretty careful. So yeah, I think body language is really important. Not only, do we need to ask questions, we need to deliver a message, we need to have a request in communication, but we have to be careful how we move. The words and the phrasing and the tone that we use is very important as well. Is it fondly that you said something? Is it cradling something you said something? Is it sarcastic the way you said something? You have to think about, okay, how am I going to answer this question or respond to that statement? Or, am I going to shrug or sigh or roll my eyes about the request that I was asked, you know.
Mm.
And communication is available in so many different ways that, yeah, you can pull a lot out of a statement or a, you know, emotion.
I do want to bounce back to the body language part of that, and then the second part of that as well. But the body language is interesting because I don't know if anybody likes reading stuff like that. You know how you're supposed to stand and all this. And so the last one that I was watching was this lady, and she's like, I have a naturally down facing mouth, and then I was just like, I think I have a naturally down facing mouth. I've never thought about this lady. Like, where are you going with it? And she's like, well, we've all heard of RBF before. We all have it, heard of it, or maybe you have it. I'm not really sure. And then it's like, well, naturally people don't think that I like them right away, or naturally I come off intimidating right away. And I'm just in my own world, not doing anything. But apparently my face naturally faces down. And I was just like, oh, she's like, so what I have to do when I'm talking to people, you know, especially if I'm in an environment where I want them to feel comfortable and invited, so I just have to naturally just a little bit. And I was just like, oh, I can do that. I can naturally just a little bit, you know, because I want people to feel that, even though it's extra for me when I'm in an environment with other people, I still want them to feel comfortable. I don't want them to look at me like I have RBF all the time.
I think it's a job. So in order to be successful at your job, you need to be professional. And part of being professional is when you walk in the door, you turn the switch on and you don't forget that it's on the whole time you're at school. You know, at home, you know, I might be more like this, the doorbell, yeah, come in. Hey, what's up? Whereas in class, you know, you're much more welcoming. Good morning. How was your weekend? How was your night? You know, remember some conversation from yesterday. So what'd Steve say? You know, and you're on.
Absolutely.
Whereas outside of class or school, off the campus, you can be yourself and be different. And if you see a student outside of school, I mean, I don't know. I don't hardly ever see anybody outside of school, so I don't know how I'd respond. I guess normally.
I dodge them the other way. I'm all, oh.
And my
Maybe you didn't see me.
Patrice, and I'm just like, shoot.
See, mine, I feel like body language, I try to make it like, hey, how are you doing? You know, because naturally people just look at me and think I'm mean, you know, and so I like to be like, oh, it's weird. I breathe air just like you. To kind of like, why are you looking at me like that? I breathe air just like you. It's weird. And just kind of break that ice with some kind of sense of humor, like, why are you looking at me like that? Because I do like to read people and they're, yeah.
I have to go for shop. I have to go shopping for food too.
Right.
You know, sorry. Kind of what you were saying was like modeling though. So if a student emails us and we don't respond, then they're going to say, oh, well, I'm not important. So why should I respond when my instructor sends me an email? And I think that's something that's, I over communicate. I do.
Is that a thing?
Oh, yeah.
I don't see a problem with that. I'll get a note. Hey, I don't know. This one came, I don't remember it as a quote, but it came in the other day. I forgot my keys or something and had to go back home. I'll be right there. And they were whatever, 10 minutes late or something. It wasn't a huge deal. And I responded, okay, thanks. I didn't have to say anything because it's like, I mean, you're going to be right here anyway.
Yeah,
you're not that far away. It's not like you're coming from Salt Lake and you're going to be hours late. You know, be careful. But yeah, just that little tick of response says, ding, they care.
Correct.
You know,
Then there's the one that goes too far and it's okay, well, you're welcome. And it's like, okay, you can stop now.
See you when you get here.
I don't need a story. I just need a confirmation that you saw and you care enough to go, okay, thanks.
Right.
You know,
Not a novel.
yeah.
But
Because next time when they are late, hey, I have a doctor's appointment, I'm going to be 2 hours late. You might not get an email. Where the hell you been? Well,
Yeah.
what do you care?
Yeah,
Because you never responded to my other stuff. So, so yeah, I absolutely agree. And most of the time, yeah, I respond most. So, I mean,
especially after 5 emails, 3 calls, you're finding, their FERPA release, so we can call another parent or friend or
Right.
something
Mhm.
because they're not used to having that communication.
Yeah, I have students that showed up when the school was closed the other night. Something about, yeah, we came down here the other night and school was closed. I sent you an email. You know I do it. You know you're supposed to read them. I never read my emails. Don't blame me.
Mhm.
But I sent you an email. I cared enough to go, hey, the school's not going to be closed, or going to be closed. Don't waste your gas.
Yeah.
Mhm.
JP, what you got?
That was it.
That was it. I do think that another thing that the students have come up with on my list, which was a long list, the first thing they said was lack of confidence, which we addressed earlier. But as we were having this conversation, I was wondering, like, is that a one-way street? Like, is it a lack of confidence from the student coming this way, or is it possible to have a lack of confidence when
Always.
As a
Express.
projection,
Always, yeah.
absolutely.
Everyone and anyone.
Yeah.
You have introvert instructors. Is that a
Yes.
thing that
Mhm.
that you can tell they're? I mean, when I started here, I had specifically, I remember 2 students who were rough and tumble students, and they had me pegged right off the start, and they played on it, and they exploited that, and it took a lot for me to figure out how to overcome that, and eventually they left, so I didn't have to anymore. But the confidence of doing the job over and over again builds on who you are. But if you're already an introvert, then I could see where it would be hard to exude confidence to your student and get them to respond back the same way.
How would one help an introverted instructor be a better communicator?
Study the information and know it.
Yeah.
There's things that I still learn after 45 years of 50 years of doing this in reality. But you get my point of, no, I don't know everything. I still have to, have a conversation that, hey, did you hear about that one thing? And I'm like, no, I guess I better get on my game and Google it and find out what it is. And you come back the next day and say, yeah, I looked that up. That was really cool. And now you can, and that's what builds confidence, even if you're not an outgoing person. I was going to say vocally outgoing person because that's most of what we do, I think.
Mhm.
But kind of lost my train of thought. But to be, to exude confidence, you have to know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you don't, feel confident in front of a crowd, that helps tremendously.
I think that's probably the best advice you could give a new instructor, actually, is it's going to take some extra time, but you're going to need to go through all of the lessons. You're going to need to read all the PowerPoints. You're going to need to come up with stories, examples, and it's not going to come right away, but you're going to have to keep practicing it over and over again, and you're going to need to know what's going on before you step into that classroom.
Yeah.
So I used to spend hours, after I'm done, I'm like, oh shoot, next lesson, like reading, trying to prepare, make sure I had my notes so that I could really just get up there and fake I knew what I was talking about.
Yeah.
I can fake it well.
You start
After practicing or learning it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great advice.
Yeah.
Anybody else have anything for the introverted instructor trying to better their communication skills?
I think it's just kind of what he was saying, and then also you never know until you're doing it. So just stop being scared, being your own roadblock, and just go for it. And experience is going to be your best way to learn. And I just like Cosmo, just like your guys, is you'll never know what's coming up next. It changes so often. And we have YouTube University and on TikTok University going on. So just trying to keep up with things that are the same, but they just named them different, I guess. And I think that way you feel confident of knowing what you're talking about. But for new educators, it's literally just experience. Once you do it once, then it'll get easier. And you're always going to have something you didn't account for. There's always going to be like, whoa, that was crazy. And I think just not giving up and not sabotaging yourself, but just realizing you won't have all the answers, just like they won't have all the
Right.
answers, and just be a good person. Do what you're good at. You know. what I
And
mean?
when you don't know, don't try and tell them something that you
No.
think.
Mhm.
You know,
They'll
be honest and say,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I don't know that, but you know what? I'm gonna go find out
Yeah,
and I will
absolutely.
get back to you.
There's
Absolutely.
nothing worse than somebody
Right.
being dishonest about something.
Right.
You don't know.
No.
That's cool.
Yeah, and you can't fake your way through it
No.
because they'll bust you on it.
They sure will.
Absolutely, and tell everyone.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Well,
Last week we had a problem with one of our furnaces that we were trying to troubleshoot. And, I did everything that I knew to do, and yet the problem kept persisting. And then we asked Tony, and he goes, "Oh yeah, these two wires are flipped." You know, so we flipped the two wires and everything worked great. And I told my students, I said, "You'll learn." I said, "I've been in this for 25 years or 30 years, whatever." And I said, "I still learn new things every day,
Yeah.
and so will you."
It's the only way you know you're alive is if you're still learning.
100.
I was
Mhm.
okay. It's not the same topic, but just I was thinking about your infinity, and I thought, why couldn't we come up with a phrase, something, your education is infinite or something? Because we're always learning. You
Right.
don't stop. When you do, you become a mushroom.
Mhm.
You know. Um,
What's wrong with a mushroom?
He's a fun guy.
Ah.
Jokes.
And scene.
The last couple of things, I mean, really from the students, it was, in case you're curious, why they are bad at communicating or choose not to communicate. We've said most of them here, but lack of confidence, fear of judgment, cultural differences. So something might be done one way where they're from, but it might be done differently here, and they're trying to figure out which one of you is right. Listening skills, sometimes they don't feel heard. Sometimes they don't listen well. Conflict avoidance were the main ones. But I think that at the end of the day, they understood as students that communication was literally the most important thing that they could do. And hopefully as instructors, we understand that also is the most important thing our students can do and how we can help them be better communicators. Because if they can do that, they can do anything.
Well, then not take it personally, whatever's being communicated.
100%.
If you take it personally instead of trying to grow, or maybe there was just some miscommunication, but taking it personally, I think just ruins everybody.
I think that's what everyone's issue.
Mhm.
Not everyone, but like I
Lot
said,
of it.
podcast, I was listening to, you've internalized it.
Mhm.
Like when your mom tells you no, it's not because your mom doesn't love you anymore.
Right.
It's because she told you not to touch the stove.
Right,
because it's
absolutely.
hot.
Right.
And some of us go and touch the stove anyway.
Just to see.
Turns out, Mom, it's hot.
And that's how you know who the loud ones are versus
That's
the quiet
exactly
ones. Some of us don't have the same stories.